How you doing, folks? You're watching Onward with Onrie Live, and I'm your host, RAE Comics. Today's guest is a gentleman that I have had the pleasure of seeing work at conventions. We've been neighbors, and I've seen this guy just totally whoop ass at conventions left and right. It is a tremendous honor for me to bring him on the show because, honestly, I haven't really had a chance to hang out with him and get to know him. And there he is, ladies and gentlemen, TJ Sterling. And I don't know where you are, TJ, but welcome to the show. That is the most dramatic entrance ever on the show before. How you doing, brother?
Hey, I'm doing great, man. Like I said, I wanted to grab some books to show the audience, so I stepped into my darkly lit studio because it's, frightfully hot out here in New York City. So would love to speak with you guys, have a good time, and thanks for having me on the show, man.
Absolutely. Why don't we kick this off by you telling us all who you are, what you do. Take the stage. This is your moment.
Hey, I appreciate that. So again, my name is how's everybody doing? My name is TJ.
Uh-oh. Let's give him a moment, folks.
OKEMUS. It's a sci-fi action story about a young kid that has a latent superhuman ability that could potentially save the human race. We currently have 5 books in the series, issue 0, 1, 2, 3, and number 4. The color edition of number 4 is actually debuting next month in July. So I would love for you guys to check it out.
TJ, could you do us a favor? You cut out for just a second in the beginning. Can you give us the pitch of OKEMUS again and show us some of the pages?
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, so, sorry about that.
Hey, no worries. So again, my name is TJ Sterling, president, lead artist of RAE Comics. My company, our first book is actually OKEMUS. This is the book right here. Sci-fi martial art action story about a young kid that has a latent superhuman ability that could potentially save the human race. And we've got 5 books in the series. This is issue 4, the black and white special edition. And we do have issue 4, the color edition, coming out next month. And we're working on issue 5 and 6 to round out the series right now.
That's awesome, man. So I was reading your bio earlier. You and I have hung out a couple times at Dragoncon and New York Comic Con after hours and stuff. And I didn't know that you actually worked at Marvel and Dark Horse and Alterna Press, and then decided to break Aspen. My apologies, and decided to just break off on your own and do your own thing. So tell us a little bit about like how that all came to be and how your experiences working at bigger publishers helped you branch off and do your own thing and find such great success.
Absolutely. I appreciate you asking that, man. Really, it's kind of been an interesting journey. I think I've always had my eye on coming to the East Coast and New York and bigger publishers and learning from them because I was always a huge fan and a collector growing up. I mean, I'm from Grand Rapids, Michigan, a really small town, but the small town's extremely artistic. We love comics. We love animation. It's something that's a huge culture, huge gaming culture, huge, card culture out there in Michigan and Grand Rapids. And it was something that I always wanted to do. I always wanted to draw comics ever since I was little, ever since I picked up my first X-Men #1 back in 1991. Like I always wanted to be a comic book artist. And to me, Marvel was like always ahead of the curve. They're always cutting edge. They had the most cutting edge stories. So after I came out here for college, my thought was like, how can I learn the business and continue my education in comics? And internships were like a very, very it was a big thing on my mind, but I didn't even know if it was a possibility. And I think what I ended up doing is I actually learned that Marvel was doing internships through, friends that I met within the comic book industry. Because since I started out as a fan for years, I would go to cons just as a fan to support creators and, for different, show premieres and whatever I could to just absorb the culture and enjoy it. And they're like, oh yeah, they do internships. Maybe you should take a look. So I ended up taking a look and seeing that, hey, they are doing internships right here in New York City. I'm already here, sent in my information, and I was lucky enough to get selected to start with the internships. And I actually did 3 semesters of interning with them, which apparently was one of the longest running internships because they usually only bring back people maybe once or twice. But I was there for 3 semesters, which was about a year's time from 2009 to 2010. And I learned a lot of essential things about the business. Really, the first thing was how freelancers are treated when it comes to, if you're working on a book, you get comped for a certain amount of, whatever book you're working on, you basically get a free comp anywhere in the world. So we learned that side of the publishing part of it. And then also after that, they realize that you've got design experience, you're going to school for art and design. Why don't you try applying for the Bullpen, which is upstairs on a couple floors up in Marvel? And this is Fifth Avenue at the time. Fifth Avenue in Madison in New York. And one of the coolest things, because my second internship started where I was actually taking pieces of these comic books and like cleaning up the pages, formatting them for print, basically wrapping my head around the print production process. And that was really where my knowledge of how to put together a comic book started. And I think if I could give anybody advice on anything in terms of like comic book creation, you can either pay a team to do it, which is totally fine, or you can, understand how to do it yourself, which kind of gives you a very informed look as to, again, print margins, color ratios, how things should be cropped. I think sometimes with certain independent books, you're missing small details that kind of push your book to the next professional level. Lettering is a big thing, the importance of lettering. Again, also having to build those relationships with people is really, really cool. And again, for being there for a year, interning, and then working a little bit for them on the print production side was really incredible. It was kind of my start into the industry. And then I did a cover for Dark Horse years and years ago. And then recently did some stuff for Aspen in a tribute issue for Michael Turner, illustrated some stuff. And then I'm currently doing some layout and design work for a Batman book right now for DC.
Wow, that's outstanding.
Thanks,
So
man.
you're a busy guy.
Yeah, I try to be. I try to be as busy as I can and try to have as much fun as possible, because really comic books are about having fun, about doing what we love. So having the experience of working with the big two to some extent, I kind of saw that for me, like I was really wanted to tell my own stories. So it was really important to me not to start my career working for other folks 100%. Things here and there, and I, obviously appreciate those opportunities, but telling my own story to me was like the most powerful thing, to have your own voice, to build a fan base, and to really just also put the reps in. Because I think any independent artist, whether you're a writer or a creator, we're still learning the trade 100%. And I think after you published a few books, you start to get a momentum and understanding of how to really do this on like a high professional level without anybody showing you. You put in your time. And I think a lot of these guys who are big names in the business, they've been doing it 20 years. You're probably only seeing 5 to 10 years worth of heavy success, but a lot of that, there's so much more years behind it. So again, for me, independent publishing is always the best way to go to start, really trying to get your voice out there.
Yeah, and learning the tricks of the tools of the trade, essentially, through your own experiences. So now you have your own series, and I know what putting that out there is like. I've seen you work at shows. You totally kill it. You're very aggressive on the floor, and in that good way, not aggressive
It's a
in that.
compliment from you, man.
Yeah.
You're
No,
out there
well,
working hard.
we're equals, brother. I see how hard you work. We were neighbors at Dragoncon one year, and we were both fucking killing it. And it's hard to do that. And understanding that side of the business, I think that's something that a lot of creators tend to try to avoid, because it's like, especially when you're on the freelance level, it's like you would rather work freelance and not have to, be. So a lot of artists are very introverted. They don't want to, engage. So bringing that up now, do you find yourself like you enjoy talking to people? I can see that from how you interact with people at conventions, just your presence and everything. Was that something that naturally came about, or was that something that you kind of quickly had to learn how to do with your own comic? Like, how did that kind of come together for you?
I'm kind of an interesting case, honestly, man, because I'm like an extroverted introvert, which I don't know how that makes sense, but it does in my case. Like when I am creating as an artist, And when I'm drawing my books and when I'm writing my books, I'm in a complete state of focus, and I'm dialed in and sucked into that world 100%. And that's where all my attention is. I don't answer my phone. And even when you and I are messaging back and forth, it takes me a while to get back to people.
No, sure, you're busy. You're doing stuff.
I'm so dialed in that
Sure.
I become introverted. But when I do come to cons, like I'm just such a huge fan, man. Like I've always loved Comic-Con. To me, everything about Comic-Con, before it was popular to go to Comic-Con, I was a huge lover of Comic-Con and the culture. And these were back in the days, like, I mean, 2005, you could buy a ticket to San Diego the same day, and there wasn't a waiting period. There wasn't any of these hoops you had to jump through. I mean, when New York Comic-Con first started, it was in the basement of the Javits. It was tiny, but again, like, those were the places where people who really loved the culture went, and it wasn't a big pop culture draw that it is now. So when I go to cons, I'm home. Like, there am I most comfortable. So it's easy for me to, get into a spirit of just, I'm having a good time and I'm talking to people. And I think we all go through, though, as professionals, we start thinking about other things like making table, and the certain level of how many no's we get and the rejections that we have to deal with, and how to continue to keep our energy at a positive level so it doesn't completely tank us the rest of the day. And I think it's easy to lose the momentum that you have. Like, let's say if you, I don't know, I guess I'll just speak for me. San Diego is like an incredible show as it is. There's a huge party scene afterwards. So if you're going out and partying and then you got commissions and then you got to be at a con the next day and you go a little too hard, it's easy to kind of like lose your juice and your energy.
Oh, absolutely.
Coming back the next day.
I've had to do that plenty of times, and it's funny. My buddy Tom Kelly, we've stayed together at San Diego a number of times. Just because we're both from Chicago and everything, so we'll split a hotel and stuff like that. He basically says, like, San Diego's where you kind of have to give your blood to the comic book, demons, and just, go out and party, no matter how exhausted you are after like working your ass off. It's just something you have to do, and it's for the networking, it's for the experience, it's for the fact that you're there. And it's a very, to me, what do you think? I mean, I've always found it to be a very daunting experience because, like, everybody's there. Everybody's pushing their shit at the same time. And you almost feel like you don't even exist. You know what I mean? It's just like you're just part of this, larger thing. And you're just this small little microcosm, microcosm or whatever. Microcosm. There you go. My man.
It was a very, very strange, mentally, I'll never forget it, because the very, very first con I ever exhibited at was San Diego Comic-Con.
Oh,
so that's
a good
2015. I haven't, this is, at the time it was still the biggest convention in the world. Now New York has surpassed them in numbers, but San Diego still has
fuck yeah, dude. It's still a crazy big show. Absolutely. So
Absolutely.
What was it like for you?
It was, like I said, it was a very kind of a crazy thing mentally, because I'm like, how do I stand out in the crowd? Because, when nobody really knows your name, they kind of stuff you in the far back corner of Artist Alley. Because I got stuffed back in the way far back corner of Artist Alley. And, everybody's walking past, but they're literally like almost 15 to 20 feet away from me because I'm in the far back corner. So in that case, it's like, how do I was thinking on my feet, like, I need to be the loudest person in the room. So I'm literally singling people out. I'm looking at people. I'm pointing at them. Please come here, talk to me. I'm doing everything I can to basically not be disrespectful to my neighbors, but to, again, show the high energy.
Engage.
And, at all costs, do whatever it took to make an impact and, start making a name for myself. And it worked. And a lot of, people who were pros were just like, oh man, like, it's really cool to see you doing that. Because a lot of folks don't take the aggressive way. They kind of just sit there and they're drawing, and they just allow people to walk by and take a look at their stuff. And, one saying that I kind of live by, it's like, I'm trying to remember the saying. It's, I think it's closed hands don't get fed, or something like that. Like,
hey, that totally applies to what you're saying here.
Yeah. So like, if you're not asking for the sale, typically you won't get it. It's like, You could not ask for it and not get it, but you could ask for it and actually get it, because a lot of times people want to invest in something. And I think when we are starting out, we just have like a newer product, people want to check it out. So you have to be very, very aggressive. I mean, I also employed a couple of tactics. Like I had a model work for me. So, like a booth babe, you could say, which a
Sure.
lot of other, I mean, it's something I learned from my time with working with Aspen. And I've known the Aspen guys for a long time. Like there are quite a few of those guys are good friends of mine. We partied, we've hung out together in San Diego whenever I'm in California. They're really incredible gentlemen. So shout out to Mark and Frank and Sia and Chaz and all the guys over there. I love the Aspen crew. Like I said, they've definitely set the bar in my mind. At the time, they had set the bar for how indies should, like just conduct themselves professionally in terms of incredible art, professionalism, things like that. And I'm like, okay, well, it's cool. They've got a booth babe. It helps bring people in. Let me try the same tactic. And that helped. So I didn't have to scream at people from a distance all day. You'd have somebody in the aisles working, that part of the, part of the con, like, hey, check us out, of giving out flyers. And that was pretty helpful. And I was lucky enough to sell out of all of my, 400 issues, 400 copies of issue 0 at my first San Diego Comic Con. But it was a grueling 5 days, man. It really was, but we worked for it.
Absolutely. And again, that's another thing too about San Diego Comic Con. It is that 5-day show. Another 5-day show that I think is just a thing unto itself is Dragoncon. I fucking love that show. And that was where I first met you, like
That's
that.
Right.
And I got there late. I my first time, I didn't realize that it was like a 5-day show as well. But typically it's it's 4 days for us exhibitors, but it's it's a 5-day event. But, it's just like, you totally get that. Now, here's a question for you. I've always found the whole booth babe thing to be kind of distracting for me. I had a couple friends who were very attractive who I asked, to come and help me out, but they didn't have the sales approach that I think was necessary in order to actually move product. For me, I would rather have somebody that can basically duplicate what I do on the floor. But
correct.
I'm just wondering, though, at the same time, a lot of people are saying, hey, you should get a booth babe. And I'm thinking to myself, maybe I just didn't utilize it right. What works about having a booth babe for you?
I mean, honestly, anytime I work with anyone, whether it's, somebody who's helping me sell a booth babe, or I have, an intern or a student, or I'm, my colorist or my letterer, I always go by one rule. I try to go by what feels right. How is the vibe, the energy between us two when we're working together? And sometimes it takes a little bit of trial and error. I think the very first year I got pretty lucky, and because I found someone through, I think it was, I posted an ad on Craigslist, like, hey, I'm looking for someone who understands and knows what it's like to sell on the convention floor, in San Diego. So the first person I got was my friend Milo, who is a model for the Suicide Girls, and they have a huge booth in San Diego every single year, and she helps, sell their merchandise and, all these other things.
She has experience.
Correct. So you find somebody who has experience. And then the year after that, when she wasn't able to come back, we found another person who was actually Alyssa, who's an incredible person, beautiful and really intelligent and funny. And she actually sells timeshares and real estate properties in her spare time. So she already understands what it's like to pitch someone and learn a pitch. And so it's like, okay, I already have the pitch down pat. I know what works for me, and I know what works with everybody, because I've trained my interns, I've trained my brother, I've trained anybody who's come to help me at a show. I've trained them on how to sell correctly. And the pitch is pretty foolproof. So it's like, if I take that and I give that to somebody who already knows how to pitch and has done it before in other avenues, they kind of just, do their thing, and they do a really great job. And I brought her back 3 times afterwards because she was so lucrative and successful for me. So I said, it's a little bit of luck. It's knowing where to look, and then knowing what type of questions to ask. And yeah, that's about it.
Now, one thing I always ask, fellow warriors of sales, I guess, I don't know. I always hate using the word sales because I think what we're really doing is we're sharing our work with people, and it's the process of selling our work. That's sort of like the reward we get, but really it's, moving our stuff and putting our books in people's hands, which
That's
feels
right.
great. But in order to get to that moment that feels great, you have to go through all that rejection, which you mentioned before. How do you
Correct.
handle rejection? Because we all get it.
Yeah, it's a good question, man. I think in the beginning, I experienced, I don't know, like rejection never bothers me. It didn't in life. Rejection doesn't bother me because I guess I'm just kind of a really headstrong person. So it's like, okay, you don't like it. I'm sure someone else will, but or you don't like me. You don't want to talk to me. Whatever. Like, who cares? Like, and I just kind of like in one ear out the other, and then keep it moving. And I think that's like a big thing that started to help me with this industry. And like, you just have to have a thick skin because and you have to try to figure out what people are looking for, because some people are there specifically for the next Spider-Man book, or they're there to meet Jason Momoa or get his autograph or touch his chest or whatever. And then you got some people that are there just for the panels, or some people there just for cosplay. So there's genuinely a large mass of people that are not even actual comic book fans. So you don't know who you're going to run across when you are on the floor. You don't know what their interests are. So I guess for me, it's like I kind of try to feel it out. Like, hey, like I'd love for you to support. If you're not, sure, no problem. And on to the next one. Because to me, it's like a numbers game. Like if you talk to a lot of people, you're going to get some no's, but you're probably going to get more yeses, because most of the people are there for comics and for the culture. And then there's a lower amount that are there for the cosplaying and the movies and the celebrities and all that other stuff. But the majority of them are there actually for the comic book stuff.
Well, here's a question for you. So now that we're in this lockdown period and most of the major conventions have been shut down for the year, how have you been spending your time? Like, what have you like? How's that affected your business? Like, how's that affected everything you're doing with OKEMUS? Because looks like you're still getting the book out there. You're about to release your 4th issue in the colored edition. I heard you mentioning that. But what's keeping you busy? How are you getting through everything that we're going through right now?
Absolutely, man. It's a weird time that we're in. I mean, again, I luckily I have a design gig as well that's outside of my regular comic work, that's kept the ship afloat. I know that some creators that do this full time have been struggling, and my heart goes out to them, because it was a tough business before when you could do a lot of cons all the time, but now that we can't do any, it's rough. And we obviously haven't been making as much money because we don't have cons. That's like the largest source of how we communicate with our audience. I mean, people love coming to different conventions and experiencing that. And I think within the time of not being able to do cons, I've been creating more books. So I'm drawing issue 4 of OKEMUS. I've already written issue 5 and 6. So I've been spent that time writing. I wrote 2 other comic books that are in pre-production right now. So those should be coming out in the next year sometime. What else? And expanding into more different avenues. I'm working on more toy stuff, more 3D stuff, more pins. Getting into that realm, and trying to understand what else is around the corner. And then also just spending a lot of time networking with artists. So using every waking moment while I'm home working to create as much as possible. Like, use this time, because I mean, a lot of people are furloughed. So if you've got that time, don't spend 90% of it watching Netflix. Like, create your ass off. Like, create as much work as you possibly can and use it, because when next year comes around and then there's cons are going to be back to normal, I think that we're all going to want to have a lot of stuff to sell and try to recoup from last year.
I totally agree with that. And, just to kind of, piggyback on what you're saying, the last few weeks, I would say post Memorial Day, which, by the way, over Memorial Day weekend, I was watching The Last Dance, and I fucking love that documentary. It just, because I grew up in Chicago, so I I grew up with the legacy of the Bulls and everything, and I was so jacked. I was so inspired, like just watching what Jordan and the Bulls did, and it wasn't just him, it was every player in that team. It was the unity of them coming together and creating this dynasty that, really just made me want to get back out there and just whoop ass, just get back to what I'm doing. And
right.
then all of a sudden you hear about, George Floyd, and everything just comes crashing down. And it's just like, we're coming into summer, we're starting to see, the peak of the coronavirus, and then all of a sudden you have all these protests and riots, and it created a lot of emotional trauma for me, particularly because, like we've been to all these cities: Seattle, San Diego, New York, Chicago, all these cities. This is sort of like where the biggest shows take place, and where I know that a lot of my customers reside. And many of
Correct.
them who I see on Facebook, expressing their feelings about what's going on, many of them taking part in everything, that having an effect on everything. The political climate just being so high right now, the tension's so high that you can cut it with a knife. And it's really had an effect on my creative ability, to the point where, there were just days where I would just lose time just staring at this fucking screen, and I can't stand it. It's just the amount of times I do it throughout the day. And I noticed,
Yeah.
my kid's doing it too. He's playing Roblox, and, we're just constantly looking at this thing, and it sucks the energy out of us. And I've never been like that before. Like, I was always too busy when things were normal to even pay attention to what was going on in politics. I was just like, pick up snippets here and there, but most of the time I was focused on work. Well, today was the first day that I finally just sat down, and I posted my Patreon page. I've been trying to do that for years, and I finally got around to getting it up there today. And I think there's something to be said about that this is the time to do that. And why did I launch my Patreon now? Because once I get back on the convention floor, I want to have that up and running, because maybe right now I may not get a lot of people subscribing to my Patreon, but once I get back on the floor and I start selling again, I'm going to start pushing that more. And now it's out there. So it may not be perfect. It may not be the greatest thing in the world, but I think you're right. It's like I'm getting ready for next year so that I can make up for the losses that I had this year. And maybe this isn't a loss. Maybe this is a period for me to kind of get caught up on the things that I wasn't able to do before, So I see a lot of merit in what you're saying personally for me. And it's, and I'm sure that this is affecting you. Everything that's going on right now is affecting you as well, emotionally. I'm sure, people, and you're in New York. So, I mean, you're in a really big metropolitan city. There's all kinds of stuff going on over there. Is it easy for you to block it out and just focus on work? Like,
Not at all, man. I mean, I think, the COVID stuff was already rough as is here. Like, again, I'm in Soho, and, which is lower Manhattan, and Manhattan got hit the worst in all of, the country. The very first like epicenter of like the craziest amount of cases, it all came here. And I knew quite a few people who lost relatives, lost friends, family members to COVID. I had, again, a good friend of mine who I went to college with that ended up getting it. And, it's such a crazy, disease, because, some people who have been healthy their entire lives now have asthma and now have respiratory issues. And it's like that type of thing is pretty scary, because, again, like, who knows where it was. And again, because we're at cons all the time, we're always in constant, contact with people. So, I mean, I did a show in January too, and we just started hearing the whispers of what it was and how it was affecting China back in January. I don't think we even had a clue that it would come here and do the damage that it did. So that was kind of a very, very strange thing. And it was a very uncertain thing. And, the age that we live in terms of, news. And I think about, when I say the word news, I say it loosely, because I think our parents' generation, our grandparents' generation, they received their news from the local news on TV, or they read the paper. When you have a media outlet that controls what people see and what they read, it's very, can be one-sided or very specific. But in this day and age, news is what you can record and put on Facebook Live or put on Instagram. It's extremely raw. It's extremely uncut. And I think what we ended up seeing was the brutal and disgusting nature of how police brutality is affecting people of color. And this is something that's been going on for as long as America has been around. As long as the police have been around, this is how they've been treating people of color. It just hasn't been as hyper visible as it is now. So again, a lot of people can relate to, you've been pulled over once or twice, and people, cops haven't been as nice to you, or they've, in certain cases like myself, where they've been more standoffish and more aggressive, and had their hand on their gun, and being pulled over 10 times within a month. Like, there's just weird things that we as Black folks, we know what that's like, and we kind of understand that, okay, this is pretty normal for us. But I think at the same time, we've kind of gotten to a point where we're fed up with being treated like that. And at the end of the day too, because we're all human beings, seeing another human being being treated so unfairly and so inhumane is a polarizing moment. You have, seeing what happened to George Floyd, because literally his death was filmed for everybody to see. And as brutal and, grotesque as it was, there's just no excuse for that type of a treatment of another human being. And because police officers are supposed to be actual superheroes, right? Crime fighters, people who actually are supposed to help, and they're not helping. They're actually becoming a part of the problem. But, we could talk about this all day, but ultimately a lot of the issues that kind of are in this system need to be looked at from a higher level. So the people that are running our country have to take a look at, how is this system that has been in place, that hasn't worked for pretty much forever, how do we fix that? Do we need to uproot it and change it? Do we need to eliminate it and to something else? Who knows? But ultimately, it was a very sad thing, because this person was not a criminal. He was not he wasn't, he was cooperating. He was actually,
He didn't deserve, he absolutely didn't deserve what happened to him.
Correct.
Plain and simple. No, nobody deserves to go out like that. And I think that's something that I think, generally speaking, everybody is aligned with that. That this situation was wrong, and it's not an isolated situation. Obviously, there were other situations that occurred that contributed to things getting worse. It wasn't just that thing. It was the other, I forget her name right now, and I apologize for it, but that lady in Kentucky,
Breonna Taylor.
Yes, Breonna Taylor. Yeah. And just for me, because as a white guy, and you and I, we grew up. We seem to be pretty close in age. We grew up kind of liking the same things, but we grew up very differently and grew up with different circumstances. I have never had anybody pull a gun on me before in my entire life. I can't imagine the fear of that. And I can tell you situations where I've had, police officers pull me over, and, they were standoffish and dickish with me and all that stuff. And, that's one thing, but it's another thing to experience it like at this, in this surreal way. And given what's going on right now, and given, the fact that you are trying to be creative at the same time and trying to be productive, because at the same time you are aware just as much as I am that, the shows are going to start up sooner than we think. And
That's
when
right.
they do,
and I wanted to jump back in and just say that, just because I did apologize, I didn't answer the previous question. But when those moments happened, it was extremely polarizing, and I was not able to work for a few days. Like, I think for a week, I was pretty messed up mentally. And I think what I took some peace in was being able to join a protest and be a part of the positive things, positive parts of that, because there's a lot of positive parts of a protest, because again, these people have to listen. And I think the people that are protesting correctly and safely, they're making their voice heard in the right way, and people have to listen now. And unfortunately, there's some folks that are in the mix that are causing, craziness with the riots. I'm not sure who those people are, because a lot of them have been identified, but a lot of people are angry. And I think for me, creating is like the best way to shift it back into a place of positivity. Obviously, doing what we can to support local businesses, supporting the families of victims that this stuff has happened with. That also, I think, has been a good thing for me in terms of like helping me deal with a lot of this stuff. But yeah, I mean, trying to find it's like watching Happy Gilmore, right? Trying to find a happy place, listening to
which is
song.
fucking hard. Even before
Yeah,
all the
it's
George
tough.
Floyd stuff, it was
That's right.
fucking hard, and
It was tough.
every time they cancel a show, it is just the most heartbreaking thing. Like
Especially when it's a good show and you're going to make money or you've been invited to a show. I mean, I fortunately, there's been some shows I've been invited to where I don't have to pay for anything, and it's nice because it's like I show up and it's all profit. And then when I can't go and because of COVID, it's like, oh, it kills me. But we understand that it's better safe than sorry, right? Because we don't want that shit. We don't want COVID. We don't want the fans having it, and we all know how intense con crud could be. Con crud is a motherfucker as is, right?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Like,
Absolutely.
that's a whole nother thing. And then couple that with what possibly COVID, like we don't like it's, and I think if cons are going to be smart, they should really be figuring out ways to be safe, whether it's telling people to wear masks at a show or having them check their temperature, things like that. I think, the fans have to maintain a level of responsibility, then we have to as well.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up because, in a couple weeks, I'm going to be heading out to Tampa for Tampa Bay Comic Con. I'm heading right into the Lion's Den. And, I got to say, I'm pretty, I feel ready for it, but you can never be ready for something like this. But the one thing that made me feel at ease prior to me making the decision to do this show was a couple of things. First off, the showrunners are taking temperatures before people even walk in through the door. They're allowing 25% of the capacity that they normally have. So this show typically fills up to about 50,000 people. So, at max, they'll probably have 12,500 people there, assuming that 12,500 people even show up because of what's going on. And, the other thing too is everybody has to wear masks. And, there's a lot of people that have expressed disapproval and some apprehension about me going over there. But, like you were mentioning earlier, this is my main source of income. There is nothing else. And even after I do this show, I won't be able to pay myself, but I will make money from selling books. And I know that I can sell a certain amount of books because I've been in horrible convention scenarios where there have maybe been like 500 people on the floor the whole weekend, and I managed to sell enough books to at least cover the table and make money for the business. Didn't leave me with much, but I'd rather do something than sit on my ass and do nothing. And I also think another way I look at it too is we got to navigate. We got to understand what's going to happen. I'm fairly optimistic. I read an article today that mentioned how Dr. Fauci said they're going into the third and final stage for testing for a vaccine, and he's hoping that it'll be ready in early 2021, and we'll see things get back to normal as soon as that vaccine is rolled out. And the current administration is working with them and everything like that on that too. But this has become such a polarized thing, which is unfortunate. So the way I see it is that we need to be self-governing ourselves, and we need to be making smart decisions. If you don't feel safe going into a convention, don't go. And
right.
there's nothing to feel bad about. No one's going to judge you for it. If you do go, don't be stupid. Don't enter blind, deaf, and dumb. Don't think you're one of those guys that is going to say, this thing doesn't exist and I'm just going to go right into it, be in a crowded place for 3 days, not wear a mask, not pay attention to it, and come out. Because you're right, con crud sucks. I got fucking mono from doing conventions. Never kissed anybody at doing conventions before, but got mono and was out for a month. It can happen.
Insane. Yeah, I think what people have to realize too is that you can't just go as hard as you normally do, right? Like, people, I mean, again, like I've got friends that are cosplayers that do San Diego every year, and they've got 10 people in one small tiny hotel room. Half of them don't sleep or shower as frequently as they should.
Yep.
Clearly, they're not taking vitamin C. They're not rested properly, so their immune system's already compromised. The germ level's high, and there's obviously artists. Like if we're working 4-day shows, we're already tired as is. If we're going out, our immune system's compromised, and it's just like it's a story, like a shitstorm of just bad stuff waiting to happen. I think. You mentioned mono, which is crazy because I had a friend of mine who got, I think she got like a really bad case of strep throat or something from, Concord that turned into strep throat. Like there's some serious germs that happen in those buildings, and the bathrooms are never clean as they should be.
Nope.
But it's like, how do you continue to keep a bathroom clean? Because there's always someone in there. But how do you continue to keep it clean when there's thousands of people coming through and it's like a revolving door?
There's not much you can do, and that's why like couple things I don't do. This is just my rule of thumb. I don't shit at comic conventions. I hold it in, man. It's like I'll wait until I get back to the hotel. But
that's funny.
Little TMI for you, but I apologize.
Don't explode on this, Onrie.
Yeah, exactly. Don't eat a burrito before going to work.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it's a crazy thing, man. I think again, fans just have to be responsible. Don't overexert yourself. Don't come in sick. But it's just tough though, because again, if you're waiting outside for hours to get in a con like Dragoncon, for example, and it's 95 degrees outside, pretty hard to like not sweat and be nasty when you actually get into the show. So I mean, again, I just think there's something to be said about circumstances are one thing, but if you can control your health, whether you're taking your vitamins or doing whatever you can to stay physically healthy while you're at a con, it just works better for everybody.
I agree.
So hopefully, and are you doing Dragoncon? Or you?
I'm going. I mean, if and supposedly it's happening. I mean, dude, the way I look at it is this: it's not going to be. There's no way they're going to allow for 88,000 people to show up at that show. The way I'm looking at it is this: this is going to be a dialed down version of Comic-Con, where basically it's a seller's market. People come there, they buy their comics, they move on to the next thing. And I would rather be there at least representing my book so that I can, get something out there and do something than not show up at all. And of course, if there are situations where, I think it's just really dangerous, then I wouldn't go. But I feel safe. Again, I'm not coming in blind for it. But again, I don't think I think when they announce that Dragoncon is happening, I don't think that people should see it the same way they would normally. Like, I don't see them packing the halls. I think they're going to have to limit the amount of people that show up. That's definitely going to affect the amount of books that we're going to be able to sell at a show. So I wouldn't bring like thousands of books with me. I'd probably bring like a quarter of what I would normally bring to a show. Like even with Tampa, my goal is to just sell 700 books if I can do that. And if I don't do it, well then fuck it. At least I did something rather than nothing,
That's
and
correct.
That's fine. If I came in there with this, it's a comic convention and people are in there, I'm going to go in, balls to the wall. Now's not the time to think like that. Now is the time to think like you're going to Costco, and you're doing the essentials. And that's kind of like the way I see it from a business standpoint. This is the essentials right now, representing, getting our books out there. Cause you know how it is for us. How do you even go about distribution? I mean, you're talking about going to stores, right? I read in your bio that you're in about 10 stores, but that's a consistent follow-up thing. Stores got to know you, they got to trust you, they got to believe in your product, and on top of that, they got to push it consistently. On top of the fact that there's new stuff coming out every week, so your stuff is going to get shuffled underneath stacks of new stuff that come out every week, and it's hard doing what we do because we invest everything into this, and we'll sell this all day, every day, for as long as we fucking have to, because it's us. It's our whole thing. Right. And that's what I think is important. And no one can do it like us. There is no better experience than coming up and meeting you at a convention, talking to you, seeing how kind you are, and then, buying your books, you signing them for me, and me getting that experience and saying like, look, I know this guy now.
Well, just think about it as a fan, right? Like when we first started going to cons, we were basically going there to meet our favorite artist, right?
Yep.
To get them to sign books. But again, people are meeting us now before we're their favorite artists. Like it's a genuine opportunity for them to get into the mind of a creator and be a part of, something more than just, going to a store and buying a comic book. I mean, thankfully, I've been able to get into, quite a few big shops, throughout the country. And, it's cool to be in comic book shops, but I don't want to downplay it because I definitely appreciate the opportunity.
No, of course.
But they take, 50% of the cover of your book. And to me, I just didn't find that to be a lucrative endeavor long term. So for me, like, cons are where it's at. Doing as many cons you possibly can, and obviously beefing up your online presence so you can sell more online. I mean, I've been trying to do some virtual Comic Cons, which have produced some sales here and there, promoted ads on Facebook and Google, on Instagram and Google, which definitely help as well. But, also just taking the time to meet bloggers and talk to people online about your product and your niche market, and that also generates sales. So figuring out a way to do more online stuff is definitely a big thing. It's a huge thing in my mind. But to me, cons are always going to be number one.
Yeah, no, of course. And here's the thing about online, because we've all been kind of like, thrown into this pit of like, hey, we're online now. And, I've offered every goddamn incentive I can in order to get people to buy books online. And I'm not afraid to admit this, but my online sales are just not as strong as they are when I'm at conventions. It's just clear. I mean, like you just said, I will not contest that. That is 100% true. It's just not the same thing, because when people go on the internet, what are they doing? They're looking for the information that they're looking for, much like what happens at a comic convention, except here's the difference. When you're walking down Artist Alley or you're walking down small press, booths or whatever, you're there because you want to be there. And there are a lot of people that want to be in those areas. And then there's people who are passing by who don't even know, but you can still pull them. That's kind of like seeing an ad for something that interests you on Facebook, but generally speaking, it is extremely hard as an independent comics creator to stand out when you have all this stuff going on, especially right now with the latest controversy in comics with, a lot of creators being called out regarding, sexual harassment and stuff like that. I mean, that's been a big, what do you do in that point? You ignore that and start saying, hey, buy my book. I mean, you kind of have to, either say something or don't say anything at all, or and it's just there's a lot of guilt that comes in it too when you're constantly pushing and you feel like no one's listening, because the truth is that your stuff is getting blocked out, not because people aren't interested in what you have to say, but because they're just inundated with so much other stuff, and the bad news just keeps piling up every fucking day. It's not like it's getting any easier.
2020 is kind of I just think the irony of it is kind of interesting and comical to me, because I think 2019 everybody's talking about, oh man, 2020 is going to be the year, everything's clear and everything's perfect, everything's amazing, and then it's like literally one of the shittiest years we've had in a long time. So it's definitely hard to. And see, this was the thing for me, like, because I was literally going to do a Kickstarter campaign for OKEMUS Issue 4 back in like February or March, and I'm thinking to me, it's like, how can I ask people for money when, people don't even have jobs right now? Like, so, I mean, I postponed my Kickstarter and, I'm revamping it and changing it, and I'm going to actually do it in July next month. But, for a while, I just didn't feel right asking people for money. Like, ethically, I just didn't feel right doing it. So
I totally get it.
Just took a break, and it's the same thing. It's like, during this time, like, let's just take a small break and then we'll come back, because again, like, sometimes the controversy of what's going on, or the some of these movements that are happening, whether it's Me Too or Black Lives Matter, or what's happening in comics right now, whatever these things are, they deserve their time to shine so they can do what they have to do, and can raise that awareness, because a lot of those organizations need support, and then it'll be back to us afterwards.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping for. And 2020, I mean, I'm not kidding you, it was supposed to be the fucking year, man. Fucking Mulan was coming out in theaters. I mean, that would have been huge because it's like all Asian cast, you know, no singing and dancing. It's just like a straight up, you know, sword and sorcery, like Disney Asian movie. And you got Shang-Chi being, you know, made into a movie soon. She-Hulk, which was primarily written by my co-writer on Yi Sun-shin, that's being turned into a Disney Plus show. And all this stuff was just like coming. And it's like 2020 was the year, you know, like I had a great 2019. It was probably the best year I've ever had working in the business. And
Same here.
and then this fucking shitstorm comes, and I really, you know, and I the one thing that always makes me feel good is when I talk to folks like you, because and just in general talking to people, because I think one of the things that happens too is when we get isolated and everything, and then we read the news, we become fearful. That fear turns to hatred because we're obviously angry about what's going on, and you know, then we want to be a part of something, and we want to feel like we're contributing. But the one thing we're not doing is we're not talking to and listening to each other. And I think generally speaking, the one thing that a lot of people seem to be forgetting right now is that on the whole, we all want the same thing, regardless of what our backgrounds are. We all want to get back to what we were doing. We all are very passionate about what we're doing, especially like, you know, people in our business who we didn't get into this because we were making a shit ton of money. We got into this because we loved what we were doing. You know, it takes a lot of balls to just say, hey, I'm gonna just commit my life to making comics and live in New York City and do this full time. You know, that I you know, my hat's off to you, man. It's and I can't imagine how expensive New York can be, you know.
Oh yeah.
So
you're not lying, man.
Yeah.
You gotta have a you gotta definitely have thick skin. Again, rejection is a part of it. I mean, I always look at, when I think of rejection, just like the landscape, right? Let's say you're watching your favorite YouTube video. Well, I'm just saying, let's say you're watching your favorite creator talk on YouTube, or he has a video of some sort. Or let's say you're watching like the preview for whatever you're like, the Mulan or something. Guaranteed, like there's, you know, 20,000 likes, but then there's like 1,000 dislikes. So it's like, to me, like there's always more people who like stuff and want the content than there is people who dislike it. So it's like, to me, the people who are, you know, dislikers and haters, like they're always the minority. And you always kind of get past that stuff. And, you know, it's crazy to me because, again, this year was definitely supposed to be the year. And, you know, we've gone through, comic book artists have always weathered the storm in any space. I think it's crazy that they weren't distributing books for a long period of time, because that's never happened in the history of the world. But
no,
even
the Olympics getting postponed. I mean, I don't think people grasp how big a deal that is. This is, you know,
that's right.
Yeah.
I mean, never in our lifetime. It's one of those things that I think will allow us to, again, we've experienced rejection, we've experienced negativity. That's what my point was before. And this is just kind of like some of the most negative stuff we've ever experienced, you know, on a grand scale. But I think it will definitely make us stronger. Our stories are going to get better just because we're going to have more things to talk about. I mean, I think it's going to be interesting to see what the landscape and the playing field is once people start creating stories about that time when, you know, COVID happened and police brutality and, you know, a shitty, you know, government, you know, political structure. Like, it's going to be interesting to see those stories that come from that, because
I agree.
there's just a lot of stuff to tell, man. There's a lot of stories that need to be told, and it's going to be our jobs to continue to push those narratives forward. But also just being prepared for whatever comes, man. I think it's also another thing, like, we have to figure out a way to save our money. We got to be better at saving our money. We got to figure out better ways of doing stuff, you know, smarter than harder, right? So it's like having a more online presence, so we don't have to be in as many places. And we can sell books online. We can send, because I agree with you. It's tough to replicate the same amount of sales in person versus online. Like, just there's a certain connection that you can make with people one-on-one when you're right in front of them. There's the impulse buying factor.
We're social creatures.
That's
And like
right.
what you're saying too, there's the impulse buying thing. It's like, what? Okay, yeah, sure, I'll throw you $10, $20, whatever it is. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
You
because
know,
it's an experience.
absolutely. There's something I wanted to share with you. So last week I was in Tennessee with my family. We rented a cabin, and I brought a bunch of graphic novels with me. Very bad internet there. It was perfect. And while I was out there, I picked up a bunch of graphic novels that were sitting in my stack, and I just read through them all. This one book I read was Will Eisner's short stories that Will Eisner had put together from his experiences in the Vietnam War. And it had a foreword by Matt Fraction in it. And Matt was writing about his experience meeting Will Eisner. And he said that when he met Will for the first time, he was a kid. And Will always loved being at conventions. It always gave him more energy to create more. After he was in these environments, he would go home and he would work harder. He would always be trying something new. And talk about a guy who lived through some shit. You were talking about earlier how comic book artists weathered the storm. These guys, they would have businesses that would be, hitting levels that they were making so much money, and then all of a sudden a crisis would hit, like the Great Depression, and would totally put them out of business, totally force them to start from scratch. But they would come back, and when they came back stronger. I mean, we all know Eisner, he coined the term graphic novel. In his retirement, he created 20 graphic novels that stand the test of time. I don't care how into the genre you are or aren't. If you pick up one of his graphic novels, you will tear through that fucker in like 20 minutes because it's just he's just that on.
Yeah, absolutely. That's well, I said, like, I think, well, I know that life provides us the color to create with, right? Gives us the real backstory behind the stories that we create, and helps us paint better pictures. And I think coming from this, it's just, we start to think about, what is a hero, right? What is great storytelling? What are the stories that can resonate with people? Where are people's minds at? I mean, I think it's just interesting to see because we're not old guys, right? Like, we're, people who are in their mid-30s are relatively young, like still very, very young people. But within the last, 20 years, from the time we were in high school or middle school, whatever, the playing fields changed so much in terms of information, how it's absorbed, and how people are viewing things. And it's just really interesting to me because, you see, like, around the corner a little bit, like, oh, this is, we might not have regular news. We may just have, like, people creating the news themselves, creating their own narratives based on the truth. And I think it's just incredible that we're already in a narrative space. So how do we take that narrative space and continue to create powerful, impactful stories that are true and honest and real? Because that's really what the world wants. They don't want biased, left, right wing news or whatever. They don't want to watch one
They
channel and
want
get
real. They
one.
want real accounts. They want to hear what we're
Exactly.
doing and how it
Exactly.
impacts us. You're not the first
Correct.
person to say that and express that to me over the last few days, and that's really something that I feel is true, especially as artists. We pave our own way. We create our own destinies essentially, and we can relate to people who are in certain camps and get behind them because they're our customers, at the end of the day. And, some of them we can agree with, some of them we can't agree with, but as long as we kind of keep it on the level of our work, because the way I think is if we want to change people, the best way to do it is through the impact of our work, through what we do as artists.
That's right.
Yeah, right
And
on.
you're a beast at selling, man. And
I
I
appreciate
think,
that.
you've got, no problem. It's all true. And you got a great product, and I'm sure there's young people who want to learn how to do what you do, how to do what we do. And, we can, that's how we can be of service, like teaching people who really want to know, who are really about trying to better themselves. Because there's always those really serious people who are collectors, little kids that, man, like, this is amazing. And again, you're a father, so you get what it's like to be a mentor and to be a teacher without even being one by title. So it's a powerful media that we're in. And again, I wouldn't change it for the world. I love comics. I love being a part of the culture and just love being able to interact with people. So I'm super excited to get back to it.
Absolutely, man. Well, we've come to the end of our show, and I'd like to give you a chance to do a final shout out. Tell us where we can find you. And I'm going to tell you right now, TJ, I have never actually stopped to pick up your books, but I got to tell you, when I saw you flipping through the books at the beginning of the show, it looks phenomenal. And I'm going to tell you, the next time I see you at a convention, I'm definitely picking up your book. You have my word. In fact, if it helps you now, because we're in this situation, I promise you this: as soon as I'm done recording, I will buy your book right now, because it honestly looks phenomenal. So do us a favor, give us one more shout out, and another thing too. I'll post a link at the bottom afterwards where we can come to your website and pick up your book. But anyway, take a moment and, tell us where we can find you one last time and all that wonderful stuff.
Absolutely. I just posted right in the chat, actually, the link to my website. My website is raecomics.com. That's RAE comics.com. Super easy to find. We've got all of the books of OKEMUS available for purchase. We've got print copies, we've got digital copies. There's t-shirts. There's all of our toys are currently sold out. We do have more coming. We've got prints. We've got quite a few other things. I'd love for you guys to take a look. Again, this is one of my comic books right here, OKEMUS, sci-fi martial art action tale about a young guy that has the latent superhuman ability that could potentially save the human race. Action, drama, suspense, super powerful storytelling. I'm the artist, and I also am the writer, so I take a lot of pride in telling really, really great narratives and stories. So I'd love for you guys to check it out. Again, you can easily find me, raecomics.com, raecomics.com, as well as Instagram at TJ Sterling Art or at Rae Comics.
TJ, I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to sit down with us today, to talk to us, to share your stories, to share everything. I'm walking out of this episode, with so much more wisdom. Thanks to you, man. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
My pleasure, man. It's been great talking with you. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Do me a favor. Hang out backstage. I'm going to close out the show. I'd like to chat with you for a couple of minutes. Just give me a minute.
No problem,
all right?
Man.
All right.
Later.
Yeah. All right, hang on. How do I get this thing up back here? All right, there we go. What a great episode. What an awesome guy. Like I said, I saw TJ before at conventions, and, we've kind of hung out, but we never really got a chance to talk. Today that changed. And I can tell you from here on out, our relationship's going to be different. This is a guy I've always had a lot of respect for, but after this episode, I've got even more. He's awesome. Tomorrow we got another great guest. I can't wait. I'm so glad to be back with you guys. I've missed you all while I was out of town. I'm glad to be back. We're pushing towards episode 50 of Onward with Onrie Live. And in case you didn't hear it throughout this episode, I just launched my Patreon. If you guys can, do me a favor, just go to the Patreon. I'm going to leave a link in the comments section. Check it out. See if there's anything in there. I got some tiers that allow you early access to upcoming episodes of the show. I'm going to be doing an Ask Me Anything once a month with, people who are part of that tier. And then I'm also giving you back, behind the scenes, footage of Eastern Shin stuff. And I've been busy working on this Patreon all day, so my mind's kind of like fried right now. But anyway, great being back. I will see you guys tomorrow with a brand new episode. And until that time, onward to victory.